I want you to give this to any reasonable Democrat that you know, because I don't think Democrats hate the country. Some do, but so do some people on the right, I guess. We all are in this together. And ask them, if you believe the information surrounding President Trump's dealings with Russia are enough to warrant an investigation, imagine a scenario like this. Let's say word leaked out that actual Russian spies set up a propaganda and fundraising network here in the United States and used it to spread lies and advocate for Russian interests and bilk us of millions of dollars and give it to rebels. Then that organization got busted for it, outed in federal court, but despite that, President Trump would continue to use their information and actively fundraise for them here in the United States. I think you'd be out of your mind with rage. I know I would be. I'd be standing with everybody else who's like, this has got to stop. I'm going to show you that's exactly what is happening with Congresswoman Omar. She is engaging in exactly the same thing. Exactly. I mentioned last week that Omar would be in Los Angeles to give the keynote address for the fundraiser for CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations. As usual for Omar, the media just goes, oh yeah, okay, big deal. And oh boy, big deal, it's CAIR. Well, let me give you a quick refresher on who CAIR actually is. This is the actual court case from the United States of America versus the Holy Land Foundation. This case is so important because what it revealed was, for the first time, an elaborate scheme launched by the Muslim Brotherhood to tip American sentiment towards the Palestinians, tip it in policy, in sentiment, and to raise money to support Hamas. They were officially designated a foreign terrorist organization. Now, if anyone doubts whether the Muslim Brotherhood had a role in the creation of Hamas or if they advocated for violence, you don't have to look any further than this. This is the official Hamas charter. Article 2 states, and if I may quote, the Islamic resistance movement, that's Hamas, is one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. The Muslim Brotherhood movement is a world organization, the largest Islamic movement in the modern era, end quote. Okay, so Muslim Brotherhood was involved, but it's a peace movement, you would say. Well, I'm sure it says it someplace in the charter. In fact, oh yeah, here it is in Article 13. And again, I quote, peace initiatives. The so-called peace solutions and all international conferences to resolve the Palestinian problem are all contrary to the beliefs of the Islamic resistance movement. Next page. There is no solution to the Palestinian problem except by jihad. All right. So the Muslim Brotherhood created Hamas very specifically to destroy Israel, but they also created Hamas support groups all over the world. So Hamas is in Palestine, then you have the Muslim Brotherhood up here, and this support group all over the world provided streams of cash to support their fighters. But it also worked to try to influence other countries to change their policies on Israel and support Hamas. The Muslim Brotherhood quickly moved into the United States, and they set up one of these networks. And let me show you. Here's the Muslim Brotherhood. Here's Palestine. They set up Hamas. Then all over the world, and here in the United States, they put the Palestine Committee together. The Palestine Committee was broken up into three parts. The United Association for Studies and Research, that's a think tank. The Islamic Association of Palestine, that's in charge of propaganda. And the Holy Land Foundation, that's the fund. They were in charge of procuring and funneling money back to Hamas terrorists in Palestine. These three people are this. Okay, these three people came down here and they created the propaganda arm of CAIR. CAIR was created as a tool for the Islamic Association of Palestine by those three men, Nihad Awad, Omar Ahmad, and Rafiq Jabbar. Now, Awad and Ahmad, these These two, all right, were both caught via FBI wiretap at an infamous Philly meeting. This is where law enforcement were able to verify that the Palestinian Committee, the U.S.-based Muslim Brotherhood, was discussing how they were going to continue to support Hamas. I want you to remember this man's face. It's very important. Now, the official court document that was annotating who was at the meeting in Philly is right here. Both of these men attended. Both of these men were key speakers. Ahmad was the person that actually set up the meeting and led the opening remarks. These are the founders of CAIR. It is absolutely indisputable. CAIR is Hamas. Nihad Awad continues to lead CAIR to this day. This is who Omar is fundraising for next week, the propaganda arm for the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. Now, how is it nobody is interested in this? How come no one is pointing this out? The question that we have to ask ourselves, if all of that is true, which it is and verifiable, please do your own homework. Congresswoman Omar, is she ignorant of CAIR's true identity, or is she a willing accomplice? Well, we have to go back to where she was born. She was born in Somalia, Mogadishu, in 1981. Then, because of this horrible civil war in Somalia, she had to leave. In 1992, she went to Kenya. In 1995, she was approved as a refugee, and she settled in Virginia and then quickly moved to Minnesota. In 2011, she graduated from the Humphrey School of Political Science and International Studies. Okay, while she was there, the Humphrey School is a place that the CAIR has their tentacles all over this Humphrey School of Public Affairs. So when Omar was at Humphrey, this was the type of conferences being held there. Islam in the West, with the goal of, quote, pursuing development and enhancing understanding between Muslims and Western worlds. Okay, not bad. This event was co-sponsored, of course, by the Minnesota chapter for the Council on American Islamic Relations. Remember, also known as Hamas, the propaganda arm. Last summer, CAIR was at the Humphrey School leading a challenging Islamophobia conference. Now, was it during this time when she was at the University of Minnesota that Omar got mixed up with the Hamas front group? We don't know. But we do know this. She is now fundraising for CAIR next week. And it has been reported on recently that she has been fundraising for them for years. This is a CAIR Minnesota advertisement for a fundraiser back in 2017. One of the noted speakers was the then state representative, Ilhan Omar. But still, useful idiot, or is she a willing accomplice? Well, it's one thing to show up for a few events for CAIR at her school or for some random fundraiser, but it's not like she actually worked for CAIR, right? Well, let's take a quick peek at her resume, displayed full view on her own website. Look at the top. Under Community Leader, former advisory board member for Minnesota Council on American Islamic Relations. So we have a sitting member of Congress who raises money for and used to work with an organization with direct ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, a U.S. designated terror group. Now, as I said, CAIR was founded as a propaganda arm for Hamas. So what if we found evidence that she was parroting the same kind of propaganda from the halls of Congress that CAIR is putting out? Would that be grounds for at least a little intention? So Omar has gotten in trouble lately for making anti-Semitic comments. And the one that she really popped her head out with was in February. She said that the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, was controlling U.S. foreign policy. The outcry from both the Republicans and the Democrats eventually had her retract that. But she seemingly has made going after AIPAC somewhat of her own personal jihad. Now, isn't it interesting that if you go to CAIR and you look at their press releases, the main target of CAIR is AIPAC. They attack almost nonstop. These are just 15 of the unbelievable, unaccounted things that CAIR has published on AIPAC. Now, I'd like to point out that AIPAC does spend a lot on lobbying, but they do not give a single dime directly to politicians. But CAIR does. Now, if there was evidence that CAIR was giving money to Congresswoman Omar, in light of her criticism of AIPAC, that would be a little embarrassing, wouldn't it? Oh, it is a little embarrassing, isn't it? So is she a hypocrite, or is she spreading propaganda exactly as she's being told to spread? Omar's anti-Semitism is dividing the Democratic Party. Even Rahm Emanuel is writing condemnations for Omar's actions and saying, what are we doing? The divide amongst the Democrats eventually led to a formal House vote to condemn anti-Semitism. But what they ended up passing was a blanket resolution condemning all hateful language. So in other words, what Omar said was bad and anti-Semitic, but we're not going to call her out by name, and instead we implore people just to talk nicely to each other in general. It was ridiculous. But how can the Democrats not be in agreement to chastise Omar and condemn anti-Semitism? Did some outside lobbying group known for propaganda pressure Democrats to leave Omar alone and water down the anti-Semitist talk? Well, here's a photo taken at the Capitol just before the House vote. The man standing next to Linda Sarsour is Nihad Awad, the same man that was the head of and founding member of CAIR and directly identified by the FBI as one of the Palestinian Committee members supporting Hamas.